Are you curious about vegan wines and how they're different from non-vegan wines? And more importantly, do they taste any good? What are some unusual and delicious plant-based food and wine pairings that you should try? And even if you're a die-hard carnivore, what will surprise you about the new vegan wines coming out onto the market? Well, tonight you're going to get those stories and tips and more. But first, if you're watching this video on the replay, please type in the comments the word replay. I always love to know who's catching it then. Let me know where you're logging in from, and maybe what's in your glass or which wines you've discovered lately. Similarly, if you're here with me live, I want to hear from you as well. This is a recording based on a conversation I had with our two guests, whom I'll introduce momentarily, for my podcast, Unreserved Wine Talk. I'm Natalie McLean, and I host popular online wine and food courses. And you are joining the most passionate group of wine lovers who gather every Wednesday at 7 p.m. to talk to the most interesting people in the world of wine. I will be live in the comments, so please get in there. Let us know what stories you're enjoying, what questions you have, and I'll be responding to you there as well. So, before I introduce our guests, let me say that one of you is going to win a copy of their terrific book, The Social Herbivore. It's the first book ever on plant-based food and wine pairing. All you have to do is email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com and tell me you want to win a copy. I'll choose one person randomly from those who contact me. All right, back to our guests. Starting with Priya Rao. Am I pronouncing that correctly, the last name? Priya Rao?
It can be Rao. It can be Rao.
Okay, Rao. Has hosted many vegan food and wine events, as well as appearing on breakfast television, 6:40 a.m. radio, and Rogers Daytime TV. She also writes for Vine Roots, Grapevine Magazine, Restaurants Canada, and nataliemclean.com. Thank you for your contribution and your service. Priya has also created and co-hosted the TV show The Drink for Bell 5 TV. She is a popular presenter at food and wine festivals and events, as well as hosting dinners at private clubs and golf clubs. She is the co-founder of Social Herbivore with Jennifer Huether, and together they published the plant-based food and wine matching book. Jennifer Huether became Canada's first female master sommelier in 2011 and is one of only 30 women master sommeliers in the world. She has been an active member on the board of directors for both the Canadian Association of Professional Sommeliers and the Femme de Vin to support women in wine. Jennifer has worked at many top-tier restaurants, including directing the multi-million-dollar beverage program at MLSE in Toronto, a group of more than 6 restaurants with 11 sommeliers whom she mentored. She has also represented leading California-based wine brands such as Cliff Lead Vineyards and the Jackson Family Wines. Currently, she works with Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits in Las Vegas, where we are all jealous of her so-called winter weather. Jennifer, Priya, welcome. We're so glad to have you here with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right. So, yeah, I should have mentioned Priya's logging in from Toronto. Of course, Jen is logging in from Vegas. So we have a 3-way conversation this time. It's going to be lots of fun. All right. Before we dive into your wine careers, ladies, I'd like to ask each of you to tell us about one memorable wine moment. It could have been related to personally or a professional wine situation. Priya, do you want to kick it off?
A memorable wine moment. There have been so many. I mean, I haven't tasted as many grand wines as Jen may have, but I did once get to go to a holiday tasting at Casa Loma here, which was just gorgeous. I mean, in the castle. And they had Madeira from 1812, and It was fantastic. And to me, that was just everything that I love about wine. I'm not a somm. I'm just a casual drinker, but it was tasting history, a moment in time in a bottle, and it just blew my mind. It was fantastic. Still.
It was still holding up after 1812. Wow. Oh my goodness. That's when Canada and the US, I think, had some disputes. That's a long time ago. Wow. Yes. Jennifer, do you have a memorable moment?
Ooh, I have several
Okay.
memorable moments for sure with wine, but I think probably the most special would be when I was in Burgundy about 5 years ago, and I had the opportunity to visit Domaine Romanée Conti, which is a
Ooh,
huge privilege. And they
top
pull out
top
a mystery
Burgundies and
bottle.
Pinot Noir in the wine in the world, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So these are the top wines of the world, and not many people get to go and look behind the curtain, if you will. And so it was a real privilege. But the fun part was that they pulled out a wine, and they didn't tell us what it was. And it was absolutely delicious, very dark gold. It was. It turned out to be an old Chardonnay. It was 1970 Montrachet, and
Wow.
just like Priya's Madeira, it was still holding up, which was absolutely shocking after decades and decades for white wine.
Yeah, history in a bottle. That is the special thing about wine. I mean, I used to market packaged food goods at Procter and Gamble, like Crisco and Duncan Hines, but there's
Okay.
nothing with more soul than wine. I mean, it is bottled history. And those bottles, by the way, for those who may not know, at Domaine Romani Conti, or as the cool kids say, DRC, can go for thousands of dollars per bottle. So it was quite a special tasting that you had there, Jennifer.
Yes.
All right. So
Tough life
now
being a
let's.
master som.
I know all this winter weather, historic bottles, trips to Burgundy. Okay, let's get into our topic because there's just so much to discuss when it comes to plant-based food and wine pairing. Can either of you give me some stats or other pointers that really show the increase in interest and popularity of vegan foods and vegan wines over the past 4 or 5 years?
I mean, I can talk on the food side, absolutely, but I'm going to leave all the wine stats and general knowledge to Jen because she's the expert. So on the food side, I mean, The Economist back in 2019 declared that year to be the year of the vegan, and ever since then, throughout lockdown and COVID and all of that, the interest and the rate of innovation in plant-based foods has just skyrocketed. It's just incredible the number of celebrities that are investing in different plant-based faux meats and other, in food chains and such. So it's just, you can tell by just going to the grocery store. Now every grocery store has a section of plant-based in almost in different departments, in the freezer department, in the fridge department, in the health department. So it really has just exploded because plant-based is not just for vegans anymore. It's for anybody who wants to just try to incorporate a few more plants on their plates.
And yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Priya. And I mean, obviously, there's the health factor. Is there anything else that you see driving this?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that climate change is a huge one. Health, absolutely, because when we talk about things like vegan cheese, for example, or non-dairy milks, they're not just because there are vegans who are interested in that. It's because there's so many people who suffer from lactose intolerance and have other issues with dairy products. So the health is one driving factor. Climate change is absolutely another because the
How
amount of
so?
land we
Yeah.
one great example I would say is the amount of land we use to grow, for example, soybeans, not for human consumption, but for cattle consumption, for those cattle to then become beef is astronomical. And the methane gas produced by those cattle is also really, really polluting. It's one of the largest pollutants. If we didn't have to feed the cows that end up on plates, we have more than enough land to feed the entire world, but because some places in the world have more money to have certain things in their diets, it's really driving sort of the inequities in food around the world. And the other thing I would say is, of course, the animals. A lot of people do it for the animals because they don't like to see the suffering. They don't like to hear about all the undercover stings that happen on factory farms. And
Right.
oftentimes those are repeated offenses that just don't get solved. So there's a number of factors driving people towards plant-based.
Those are
Yeah.
interesting points. Really, really good. And Jennifer, what are you seeing on the wine side of things? Why do you think there's a rise now. Some of this, there'll be some similar reasons here, but is there anything unique in terms of what's driving the interest in vegan wines?
Honestly, I think it's piggybacking on this plant-based movement, and so really that was what was leading the way. When you think about vegan or vegetarian 40 years ago, it was just kind of like, the Birkenstock granola folks who, it was a very, very small segment of our population who was genuinely interested in living that way. And fast forward to today, I mean, it's becoming, as Priya said, very, very popular and globally popular, not just, in one or two countries. So with that, I just feel like the wine industry is catching up. And as you know, there's lots of label requirements with food in particular. When you think about food, to be certified vegan or vegetarian, and to have that label on it, it's really expected if you were somebody. It's just like if you were gluten intolerant, you would really want that, you would want the food to be labeled. And so I think it's just part and parcel that the, particularly the wine industry has embraced that. I think that the wine industry also, as you know, wine is a little bit on decline right now as far as consumption globally, and younger people are interested in beers and spirits and non-alcoholic beverages, for example. So I think it's also a bit of the wine industry becoming hipper.
Ah, interesting. Wow, we're coming out of the Paleolithic age and getting with those young ones.
Kids these days.
Ah, yes, as long as they just stay off my lawn. Anyway, so now, Jen, when people hear of vegan wine, they're surprised. Some people are surprised and they think, aren't all wines vegan? So explain what is a vegan wine?
Exactly. You would just think, look, it's fermented grape juice. How did this go wrong? How could this not be vegan? But there are really many ways. So you kind of divide it into, what happens in the land itself, what happens in the winemaking process, and then what happens in the packaging process. And depending on how picky you are about how vegan the wine is, you may gravitate towards certain wineries that are in all three segments really focused on being 100% vegan.
Okay, so give us some examples. Yeah, those three levels, give us some examples of what it means in the land, winemaking, and packaging. Yeah.
Okay, so in the land, we could be not vegan very easily, right? So that's utilizing horses, for example, in the vineyards to do our work, utilizing all kinds of animal products to fertilize, for example, could be other ways that a vineyard wouldn't be considered vegan, because considered vegan is really also not using animals for, your gain, for example. And so they would be sort of cognizant of that. In the winery.
So would that include using manure from animals as fertilizer?
Yes.
And I guess the horses would be old-fashioned kind of plowing, tilling, or whatever.
Yes.
The vineyard grows. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And to be honest, there are a few wineries in the world that I'm aware of that they themselves are vegan, and this is a belief system that they have, so in this way they really are hitting all three marks, if you will, right?
Huh. Okay.
Suffice to say, general public who are plant-based, vegan, vegetarian are probably okay with just when it comes to the bottle.
Okay.
Right? And being cognizant of animal products in what they're actually drinking.
So the vineyard part of it. Or also the winemaking part of it. Okay.
The winemaking part is where most people are concerned.
Okay.
Right?
And what are those factors?
Again, so these are a lot of things, actually. So you can use animal products in so many ways. For example, it could be bone marrow, it could be char, it could be shells. It could be egg whites, etc. So a lot of times,
how are they using shells? Sorry.
So these items come into play for the most part when you're finding and filtering a wine. So historically and naturally, you could imagine 200 years ago, you're using whatever's around the farm.
Sure.
Right? There's some eggs from the chickens. Let's get the egg whites, let's mix them together. And then you put the egg whites on top of the wine, and they're heavier than the wine. They pull all the particles out and they fine it, for example. Mm-hmm. So historically, a lot of animal products could have been used because they were just easy and they were handy, right? Another one that was used historically would be ox blood, for example, right? Depending on where you were, if you were close to the ocean, maybe you were using crushed up shells. So
these are all fining agents, clarifying agents,
filtering, and then sometimes additional sugar that is not made from sugarcane, but is actually derived from animals.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot. Surprisingly, you wouldn't think. Now, fast forward to today. There are lots of other options for folks. First of all, you can just have time and you can let the wine settle and all of the particles fall to the bottom, right? So if you are patient and you just have time, we can pretty much for the most part do without a lot of these animal products. The other thing is now they have, membrane filters and things that you can buy off of Amazon, for example, and you can do it that way, and you don't need to use animal products. But I just think it's very interesting because a lot of folks don't understand that these elements can come into play when you are winemaking, and that's a big shocker.
Yeah. And what about clay and bentonite? Are they okay for vegans? Yeah. Okay. Because they're not non-animal.
They're just
all right.
soil. Yeah. They're
right.
not
For
derived
clarifying.
From.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And what about that third category?
Yeah. So here again, we can have beeswax. For example, the wines that are topped off with the beeswax. We can use. I'm
sorry. What's the beeswax? Is that Is it around the cork?
Yeah,
or?
I think Yeah, sometimes they'll dip them and it looks really pretty, and they're hand dipped in wax.
Okay.
Right? And then you're trying to break through it with your corkscrew. And it is very pretty, but it wouldn't be considered vegan friendly, for example.
Okay.
You can use things like glue, right? Glue that is derived from animals to stick your label on. The inks that are used in the label itself could be also derived from animals. So again, there are ways that we can go wrong, for somebody who is very vegan, that this would not be okay for them. Again, I defer to the fact that for most people who are plant-based, they're really just concerned that there are no animals products in their wine that they're drinking.
Sure.
Or that they were used to make the wine. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely. And is there a difference between a vegan wine and a vegetarian wine? Is there any such thing as a vegetarian wine?
I haven't really seen much of that, Priya. Have you, on packaging?
No, I haven't seen any labeling of vegetarian. However, I would think that, kosher wines, because sometimes they can use egg whites for fining, so that's vegetarian but not vegan.
Oh, okay, great. And then what's the difference, Priya, between vegetarian and vegan food generally, for those who are not as familiar with the categories?
Sure. So there's different levels. Different people refer to themselves as vegetarian. Some people are lacto-ovo-vegetarian, meaning that they will have milk and eggs. Some people call themselves pescatarian and consider that to be a form of vegetarianism because they only eat fish. But vegan basically means no animal products whatsoever. So no fish, no meats, no dairy, no eggs.
Okay. That,
no honey.
That really helps.
Well, honey's a tricky one. Some vegans will have honey. And some vegans won't.
Okay. And what clues you were alluding to this, Jennifer, but what clues on the bottle can we find? Are there official symbols that are government regulated that indicate this wine is vegan? And what do we look for?
Yes, if you flip around the bottle and you look at the back part of the label, you will see a V sign, much like you will see on food packaging, that will indicate that the wine is vegan. That being said, the industry is catching up, and sometimes you really just have to do your research to make sure a wine is, go to the manufacturer, go to the producer, and ask them.
Right.
And isn't that's one of the things about wine, which I always find interesting, is that every region has their own certifying body for different, whether it's organic or, what some of the other like biodynamics, sustainable, exactly. And with vegan, it's the same thing. So there's no internationally recognized body. So you'll often find vegan certifications, but there'll be different certifications depending on where they're from. Like in Canada, we have VegaCert, which is a Canadian certifying body. So that's something you'll often see instead of the V. So there's just so many certifications now, which is great, but also kind of confusing.
It's good to know, though, that it's not one standard. And then I've heard that sometimes if you see unfined and unfiltered on the label, there's a good chance that it might be vegan. Not guaranteed, but can people look for those terms to try to narrow it down if there's no V or anything on the label?
100%. Yeah, that will certainly be helpful. Again, sugars could be used, for example, and other things, but at least, maybe 80%, that means it's probably vegan.
Okay. And Jen, would you say that generally speaking, most natural wines are vegan?
Yes, because natural wines, that's a great point, Priya, actually. Natural wines, again, there's no legal definition, truthfully, for natural wines. It's pretty loose. However, generally speaking, they're referencing the fact that really nothing is done by the winemaker. And so they're not adding, they're not taking away, they're not manipulating the wine at all. So
low to no intervention.
Yeah. So it would be, what's in the bottle should be, just the wine and the yeast, etc.
Sure. And just to get into some of those differentiations that you've introduced there, Priya, is vegan, how are vegan and gluten-free wines different? Or are there gluten-free wines?
I'm not familiar with gluten-free wines. I don't think that's come up in my experience too much.
No, definitely in the beer world and in the spirits world, it's
right,
a big
where they would
thing.
Use barley and wheat beers, Yeah,
but they don't typically with wine. We don't see them using those products to produce the wine. So luckily, wine is gluten-free. Yay!
Okay, good to know. Yay! One check mark there in the positive side of the ledger. Exactly. Though there's more. And are most vegan wines organic, or that really doesn't have much to do with each other?
Yeah, it doesn't. It's just, again, like Priya bringing up kosher wine, for example, it's just, a certification. It's knowledge to that consumer. Hey, this wine is kosher. This wine is, vegan, for example, right? So it's just, it's that, giving the consumer the power to purchase wisely based on their criteria. Not necessarily, they don't necessarily go hand in hand.
Okay, and would they, vegan wines?
A lot of the,
go ahead.
Sorry, Natalie, just some of the other designations like organic, biodynamic, sustainable, they all sound like they're very earth-friendly and eco-friendly, and so people might think that automatically means that they are vegan-friendly, but they are not. That is not necessarily true, especially with biodynamics. So I think if people are looking for vegan wines, then do not look at those labels and think, oh, this must be vegan.
Right. And I apologize, ladies. There is a bit of a delay, so I don't mean to keep coming in over you as you start to talk. So we'll just keep going, though. This is great. Really helpful information. Do vegan wines have fewer sulfites or histamines? Are they better for our health in any way? What are the implications there? Or again, separate?
I would love to say that they are better for our health. They literally are just wine made without animal products. And so, again, it's really just giving that consumer the power to purchase with knowledge. They're not necessarily any healthier. However, there's lots of streams of wines that are becoming, if you were sort of health conscious, for example, there are lower alcohol wines. That's a really big trend right now. If you're worried about chemical sprays, certified organic in the vineyard is important, not just the winery, but also in the vineyard itself. That, I would say, many folks are also concerned about pesticides. Glyphosate is a really big issue as far as chemicals go. And so for folks
what does it do? What's about glyphosate? What is it and how is it harmful?
Oh, well, if you want to do a Google search, you can. It goes on and on and on. I don't, I'm not an expert in glyphosate. What I do know is that it's a chemical compound and that it has been known to cause many issues in humans and in animals, as well as getting into our drinking water and so on and so forth, right? So when you are spraying, for example, organically, with wine, you could be using something like copper sulfide or, a kind of a natural product, if you will, right? And not to say that that doesn't do any damage, but when we get into some of these very serious chemical sprays, and I'm not knocking wineries who gravitate towards these or need these, I'm just simply explaining that when you buy organic fruit, you're really looking for fruit that hasn't been sprayed with chemical compounds that could be super harmful over time to you. And it's the same thing with wine. When you think about a grape, it's very thin skin, right?
Yes.
There's very little barrier. So that could get into the wine.
Well, for the sake of the environment, I would say let's try to avoid those sprays, which is reason enough. But doesn't fermentation eliminate all of those potentially harmful sprays, to the human body?
I'm not a winemaker, but to my understanding and knowledge, no. They would still be chemical compounds in the wine, because when you think about it, think about red wine, for example, and how red wine is made. We utilize the skins. So the skins are in contact with the grape juice to get the color, to get the tannins, and to get some flavors. And so with that, we know that we're soaking the skins in contact with the wine, and then we're making a wine. And I understand what you're saying, alcohol could blow off because alcohol is produced with fermentation. Maybe that's going to help. Maybe it's going to help a little bit, but regardless, those chemicals they're there. And to my understanding and knowledge, they could be there in quite high levels. So that, okay. If you can, and you want to, and this is, again, it's all about giving consumers power, right?
Absolutely.
To make choices that are important to them. So if that is something that's important to you, if you buy organic fruit at home, if you're very organic with your food purchases, you might want to consider organic wine.
Huh. And for both of you, Priya, maybe you can lead off. What caused you, or what was the turning point for you in becoming vegan?
Yeah, like for the first 25 years of my life, I was a very happy meat eater, and I've always really enjoyed cooking and entertaining, and all my entertaining and meals would revolve around meat. It wasn't until I got into university that I started meeting other people who were vegetarian or vegan, and I thought, oh, this is actually something people can do. And I became vegetarian for probably like 15 years following that. And then since milk and dairy was never a huge part of my diet, I'm not a huge fan of milk, it wasn't so hard for me to eliminate that. So I've now been vegan for about 12 years. And for me, the impetus from the very beginning was just that I like animals and I don't like the idea of suffering. So to know that for my palate, for me to enjoy something momentarily, it's going to cause so much pain and suffering, I just found that unpalatable, to use a pun.
Sure.
And so
Absolutely.
eventually I just sort of made that transition. And I will just say that it also had some great benefits for me in terms of my health. Like a lot of my allergies disappeared, and
Huh.
and now I'm 52, and most people would say that I don't look it. So I really do
No,
credit that a lot to my
not at
diet
all.
as well.
Absolutely. And we're not using a special filter today on Priya if you're watching the video. It's the technology. Yeah, you're a little
That's
fuzzy around
now
the
it's going to
edges.
look like now it's going to look
Yeah,
like I put a glow filter on me just to
yeah,
make myself
that's
look
right.
better.
And those Insta filters where everything's beautiful. No, I can attest that Priya looks very young, nowhere near 52. Jen, what was the impetus for you to become vegan?
Well, that's a great question. And to be clear, I'm not 100% vegan. I'm more
Okay.
plant-based.
All right.
But how I came to this was from a different route, which was I was tasked in my former job to come up with a seminar, something topical and something that interested me, which was a great challenge. And I did some research and I'm like, this is wild. There's such a plant-based movement and the food is changing, becoming more creative and interesting all the time. And yet nobody's really talking about how to pair food that's vegan with wine. So I created an entire seminar and I rooked another master sommelier, John Zabo, into presenting that with me. And we did a whole dinner at Planta in Toronto. And we collaborated with chef. We used wines from the wineries I was working with, and it was really fun. And actually, that's where I had met Priya for, I think it was his second or third time. So we got to meet that night, and it was just a great dinner. We also did a sommelier event as well, just to introduce this concept, because the reality to me is coming from the sommelier side of the world is we're seeing more and more customers coming into the restaurants that are lactose intolerant, that are can't have gluten, that are vegetarian, that are vegan, and we need to pivot and to serve those customers just like we would for somebody who is ordering a steak. So that was more my angle initially, and then through the process, I changed my diet of doing the book with Priya and learning more and also doing our research. Really, I did
Sure.
become more plant-based and understand it a lot more.
And what is the difference again between plant-based, say, and vegetarian? What's the difference there?
I
Priya,
would
do you want
say
to talk?
yeah, I mean, vegetarian, again, generally speaking, vegetarians eat eggs and dairy.
Okay.
Plant-based means that they eliminate all animal products. However, that's just a dietary choice. Whereas vegans generally avoid leather, they'll avoid, any animal products in their lifestyle. So it's more of a lifestyle, and plant-based is more of a dietary preference.
Gotcha. Good to know all of these different things. So now you were coming around to meeting each other, and what was the moment? What sparked that idea for the Social Herbivore book?
Well, I will say that when I saw that Planta was doing this dinner with Jen and John, and I had met both of them previously, casually at some wine events, but I just thought, oh my God, this is the moment I have been waiting for, because I had been working on vegan food and wine pairings for probably about 6 or 7 years prior to that, but it hadn't really sparked in the world globally yet. So I went to the dinner and I chatted with Jen and I mentioned to her that I wanted to do this book. So we sat down and we had a meeting after that, and she was like, I love this idea of a book, and that's really how it all started.
Okay, cool. And when did the book come out?
It
What
came
year?
out in 2020, right in the middle
Okay.
of lockdown. Perfection.
I suppose you had all sorts of launch plans that went by the wayside, but well, at least we're
Exactly.
back to it now. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And so, and in getting the book out there, what were the? Can you recall any surprising things people said? Any surprising feedback that you got? Any memorable feedback that came from people
I
reading the
mean, I
book?
think, Jen, I would say that like when we hosted Yeah, when we hosted dinners at private clubs and golf clubs and such, I would say that oftentimes, and I find this generally speaking in any event that I hold, not everybody is vegan or plant-based. In fact, I would say it's probably almost 50-50. There's just such a huge interest. People have a huge interest in this because even if they don't decide to eliminate animal products completely, they are wanting to make the choice to eat fewer animal products, whether it's for health, whether it's for environmental reasons, whether it's because they really love their dog. It doesn't matter. But for us, I would say I've always found the fact that people are shocked when they eat good vegan food to be really pleasurable for me, and also a little bit surprising because there does seem to still be this lagging feeling out there that vegan food is, as Jen said earlier, like sort of granola and hippie. And we've come such a long way from that. So I think it's really been very satisfying to see people respond so well, especially to recipes that are in the book. We usually have the chef create a menu and then he'll use one or two recipes from the book. And so many times we hear the guests just saying like, this was my favorite dish and it might be my sticky toffee pudding or, crab cakes. And so that's always been such a pleasure for me. What about you, Jen?
And how many recipes are in the book?
Oh, okay. There's 40 recipes. We separate them into small talk, big talk, and sweet talk. Because for us, really, wine and food is all about creating conversations around a dinner table.
And how many wines? Are each of the recipes paired with, say, one wine or a type of wine? How does that work in the book?
Yeah, exactly. So we have definitely a couple of wine pairings. So we kind of do it with, here's my kind of value wine. And then, okay, if this, if you're turning up the volume, if this is a special occasion or you're, real wine geek, then you can go with a splurge. So we've offered options to people.
And I really like that because Jen made it so approachable for people. And also she did such a great, she really wanted to incorporate as many different varietals as possible because in our research, we did find that there are certain wines that just pair so well with so many kinds of vegan foods, but I just really like that going through the book and looking at the wine pairings, you'll see representation from pretty much every wine region and a lot of grapes that people may not be so familiar with, which I find exciting.
That's excellent. And which wines then, Jen, were the ones that tended to have the most versatility with the vegan dishes?
Yeah, that's a great question. For white, I would say Riesling. I'm going to give you three. Yeah, Riesling. And so Riesling in all its glory can be bone dry or off dry. So the versatility of Riesling and that acidity worked really well. Same thing with Chablis, which is, of course, Chardonnay from cool climate, northern Burgundy. And so I found that to be super versatile as well. And then Sauvignon Blanc, because Sauvignon Blanc naturally has a bit of that green note in it, and it works really, really well with a lot of green vegetables, etc. Right? It's very versatile. Yeah. So I love those three whites. As far as
just
reds,
before you move on, all those three whites tend to not be oaked. Is oak mean with vegetarian dishes?
I'm sorry, I missed that last part.
Does oak sort of clash with vegetarian dishes, and if so, why?
At times it can. It depends on how aggressive it is and it depends on the dish, right? Every dish in wine is made, individually, if you will, and it's all about finding that match. But yes, I would say sometimes when you think about the things that work with big oaky Chardonnays, let's say, I start to instantly think about butter, cream, dairy products. Now, a workaround would be to use a plant-based but very creamy and fatty, perhaps cashew-based cheese. So there's always a workaround. But again, I was trying to find those three white wines that tend to really be the stars. There are certainly oaky Chardonnay pairings within the plant-based, but that's not my go-to white wine.
Sure. All right. And then reds?
Food. Yeah, reds, we're going to veer more towards less tannin. So think about grapes like Gamay. Beaujolais was the winner over and over and over again. with so many dishes. So again, it was just one of those really, it works with so many things. So I'd always have Beaujolais Gamay from Ontario is also an excellent option. Pinot Noir, again, is lower in tannins, it's lighter, it's fresher, it's higher in acid. So that tends to work really, really well, again, with many dishes. And lastly, Barbera, for the exact same reason. So Barbera from northern Italy, Piedmonte, again, it has really fresh acid, darker fruits than the red fruited Pinot Noir and Gamay, but also incredibly versatile with food.
And lots of great acidity. So those would be great choices. And so was there what surprised you, back to Priya maybe, when you were doing the research for this book? What was the most surprising insight that you gained?
Through this, I mean, with wine or with people responding to the book?
With the research before the book came out, was there something that surprised the two of you that you thought, wow, and then, you included that insight in the book?
I think for me, it was Riesling. And we do a great job with Riesling, obviously, in Ontario. It is definitely a cool climate grape, and it excels in cool climates, Germany, northern France and Alsace, for example, and in Ontario. And, I have to admit, it's not my personal go-to grape. I'm definitely a Chardonnay drinker. I like those bigger, richer, heavier whites. Generally speaking, drinking wines at home. And Riesling, I remember there was a moment that we had Riesling, and Priya had paired it with, I think, was it cashew and coconut brie? I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
And it was brie. Mm-hmm. It was brie, and it was that aha moment that we look for, as sommeliers, that where the food tastes better, the wine tastes better. It's just kind of that explosion. And that was, wow, okay, I got to have Riesling at all times in my fridge.
Oh, that's great. How about for you, Priya? Anything surprising?
Well, I would agree with Jen in terms of Riesling just being such a versatile wine, from super, super dry to super, super sweet, and can go with so many kinds of cuisines. But I would say my favorite, and I think Jen sometimes gets like, oh, she's going to say that one again. But I would say Briquetto d'Aqui with like a strawberry shortcake or any kind of berries is just such a perfect summer pairing. The wine just has so much of those berries, and it feels so festive because of the sparkle in it, that I would say that's one of my favorite kind of pairings.
Tell us a little bit more about that wine for those who are not familiar with it.
Jen, I'll let you talk about the wine.
Oh,
well, it's
okay.
It's a red wine. It's a slightly sweet, but I'll let Jen talk more about the origins of it.
Yeah,
Sure.
so it's from northern Italy. It's a very local type of wine. But as Priya said, you pull the cork and it is frizzanti, so it is slightly sparkling. It's got this red-pink color, which is very unexpected for a wine that has bubbles. And then you get it on your palate and it's sort of off-dry, if you will. But again, because we're in northern Italy, it's super fresh and you've got that acidity. So you've got these beautiful berry flavors, you've got this kind of off-dry quality, these bubbles, and then the sweetness. And so it's very versatile with desserts. And as Priya said, with things that have berries in them, you can even get away with a little bit of chocolate. It's just an unexpected, daring pairing, if you will, which is pretty fun to pull out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And have either of you discovered something since the book was published that you would include in an updated edition?
Yeah, I would say on the food side, like I said, the number of innovations happening in plant-based food is just astounding. So now there's lab-grown meat, for example, which was in its very, very early stages. And for people who don't know really what that means, it just means growing meat from cell cultures, as opposed to taking them from animals themselves. So that, I would say that, I might mention that in some of the recipes. For example, shepherd's pie, I give alternatives of, you can use some of the vegan faux beef, like beef that you can get, ground beef, or you can use mushrooms or lentils. So I give a lot of different options in the book to sort of veganize some favorites, that people have grown up with. But now I might have said, maybe you could look for some of these alternatives, but also things like TVP, which is called textured vegetable protein. I have a few options here. I didn't really mention that too much in the book, but that is exactly what it sounds like. Textured vegetable protein, oftentimes made from soy, but pure soy. And let's get all the soy-based fallacies out of the way. It does not cause breast cancer. It does not have a lot of those issues that people have with soy came from one study that was way back when, decades ago, that has been debunked many times. Yeah. But the beauty of these options, and if you go to Chinese Buddhist restaurants, you'll often find faux duck or faux meats, and they taste so similar in terms of texture, and that's now something you can replicate easily at home. So I have a few different options here. I don't know if you can see them all, but you can find the small beads that can replicate ground beef. But you can also use soy chunks, which are great as a I'll pull it up here.
Yeah. You can hold it up to the camera, and then for those who are listening to the podcast, we'll put pictures and links in the show notes. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe describe that a little bit.
Once it's hydrated. Yes. So basically, it's just been boiled. It's boiled soybeans that have then been dehydrated, and then you buy them dehydrated so they last forever, but you'll rehydrate them in some warm water, and then they just have the texture of chicken. They have that fibrous texture, and so it satisfies sort of the craving you have of wanting that chewiness on the palate, because sometimes that's all it is. Sometimes what you miss from eating meat is the textures, because you often don't have those textures in vegan foods. And so there are different options for those. You can find some that will replicate beef in terms of like beef strips. So I would say that that's something I would love to include now.
That's great. Awesome. And you, Jen, is there anything that you would add to an updated edition of the book?
I mean, there's quite a bit of information there as far as how to pair wine. And as Priya had said, I was very conscious of making sure that I was really trying to represent many different countries and great varieties. So I checked that off the box. Perhaps maybe we would include a list of outstanding vegan restaurants around the world, since this has become also such a big trend. Yeah. And maybe touch on that, maybe talk about, some of our dishes maybe that look really great, and maybe how we would pair them. That could be really fun. Maybe that's another book. Who knows? But I think that, since the book has been published, we've just seen more and more and more excellent, and not mom and pop diners, but we're talking outstanding restaurants that have went plant-based, or that have much more plant-based options. So it used to be you'd go to a restaurant and, I'm going to go, order something vegan, and they give you, the vegetables. And Priya can talk about this, the vegetables and rice or pasta. And it's
from
like,
the side dishes. Yeah.
You get the side dishes. And this is not happening anymore. There's a massive trend, even in restaurants that are not, vegan or vegetarian. They're offering better and more creative choices. So I think maybe talking about that.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. I assume Planta in Toronto is or was a plant-based restaurant. Does it still exist?
It does, and they have expanded incredibly. So they are now in Miami, I believe in Los Angeles and New York as well. So they're really expanding. And they have three or four different restaurants in Toronto alone.
Huh. And do either of you know much about 11 Madison in New York? I heard they flipped, that's one of Danny Meyer's top restaurants, and it was only, I don't know, in the last few years that they went to an entire vegan-based or vegetarian-based menu?
Yeah, I had the great fortune of dining there last summer. I was writing an article on them, and it was just it knocked my socks off. I mean, the food was so innovative. It was so French in terms of the beauty of the presentation and just the types of techniques that they use. But yes, Chef Daniel Hume transitioned completely to a plant-based menu because of climate change and because he realized the need for addressing climate change in terms of what these restaurants are serving, and also in terms of food inequity. So he definitely he lost some clients, but he gained a lot of clients, and then slowly some of those clients that went away came back because the quality of the food is still astounding. And I don't think you would miss the meat unless somebody said, there's no meat in this dish, there's no meat in this dish, there's no meat in this dish either. I think overall the experience of it, you would walk away saying, I feel completely satisfied, and that was a astounding meal, and you wouldn't really think of there not having been any meat or fish on the plates.
Oh, wow. And do any other restaurants come to mind for either of you that have done something really innovative when it comes to a vegan, either an entire vegan menu or incorporating some really creative types of dishes within their existing menu?
Well, I know here in Toronto, I would say that Avello is the top vegan restaurant, and it's fine dining, and it's just gorgeous. Jen has dined there. She actually designed their wine list a while back, and they're just fantastic. So definitely I give them top props in Toronto. And then in Washington, I had a great meal at a place called Elizabeth's Gone Raw. Now, they were ahead of the curve because this was about 8 or 9 years ago, and it's a completely raw vegan restaurant. I'm not a huge raw foodie, but the techniques they use to cook to prepare their foods it was one of the best meals I've ever had in my life. So I definitely have to give them props. Montreal has some great restaurants as well. They have some great sushi restaurants that are all plant-based sushi. But in terms of Michelin restaurants, because I know you mentioned this, you were just asking me in terms of some pre-interview questions. There are a lot of top 2 and 3 Michelin star restaurants around the world that have now incorporated vegan and vegetarian menus. So I did a little bit of research, and there are 31 in London, UK. Huh. There are 21 in Hong Kong, 18 in France, 8 in Berlin, and 10 in New York City. So that's that's close to 70 or 80 Michelin-starred restaurants around the world that have now incorporated fully vegan or vegetarian menus.
Wow, that's impressive. That's really impressive. And Jen, are you seeing, are there certain wineries that are really being innovative or leading the way in producing vegan wines?
Yeah, 100%. There are 2 that come to mind that Priya and I have worked with extensively. So locally, in Ontario, Carlo Estates, of course, is, Sherry herself is vegan, and her husband. And so this is going to be one of those wineries, again, that, takes it to the next level, let's say. And so even the food that they're serving there, when you go, if you're ordering, a charcuterie board, is going to be a plant-based, or I should say vegan charcuterie board. And to define that, yes, even in the vineyard, everything is done to vegan standards. So,
and while you're on that, Jen, charcuterie, charcuterie. I always think of cured meats. What's a vegan charcuterie?
Yes. I'll let you do that one, Priya.
I have some examples right here. So this is one of the innovations in plant-based food. A lot of vegan charcuterie is made from wheat gluten because it provides that texture that can really mimic meats. So here's one brand that I really enjoy, which is Field Roast. But locally in Toronto, I would say that Sausage Party Toronto makes some amazing pepperonis and sausages. And then on the cheese sides, you'll get some fabulous cheeses. Green Goddess Fromagerie is my new favorite Ontario brand. These 2 women that make an amazing variety of cheeses in different textures and different flavors. And also veg cheese is another one that is very, very good. This is their
What are they using? Okay, wow. What are they using to make the cheese?
Yeah, it's primarily cashews or other nuts. They can sometimes use seeds like sunflower seeds, and then nutritional yeast, which I also have sitting in the jar, the long jar there. Nutritional yeast it's very high in vitamin B's and it's very good for you, but it also provides that cheesy flavor. So if you're looking to make a cheese sauce at home, you can just use some raw cashews that have been soaked in hot water for half an hour, blend those with some nutritional yeast, salt, pepper, onions, garlic, all of that, and then you have a cream sauce for your fettuccine without using any dairy. So those
All
are some of
right.
the main ingredients in vegan cheeses. They also use agar-agar as a binding agent. Coconut oil usually is used. So those are the main, kind of four main ingredients.
Okay, and back to you, Jen. You mentioned Carlo Estate. What other wineries are leading the way in vegan wines?
Well, we would say probably together Corcibella, which is in Tuscany. It's a winery that is based in Tuscany. They have beautiful Tuscan wines. So you can get a Chianti or you can get wines that are maybe Merlot based. So, you know, they've got some edge to them. They're beautiful wines in and their own right. However, again, the owner of the winery himself is vegan, and so again, it's, you know, taking it to that level where ticking all three boxes. So very vegan, very good. Yeah.
And Jen, you have a wine or two there with you. Maybe you can tell us what those are. That one is.
Well, I brought a couple of my favorites. So I have a Chablis right here, and then I have a Beaujolais.
Okay. Do you have the bottles there by chance?
I do. So I just grabbed what was really in my cellar because I read, oh yeah, we're going to have some wine. But so this, as you can see, is a Chablis. It's a Premier Cru. So this is a Chardonnay that is grown in Chablis. And so you're really going to get that kind of minerality from the earth and the soil and the terroir here. It's really fresh. It's high in acid, very vibrant, green apple, citrus. And so it's going to work with something like Priya's crab cakes, which are one of my absolute favorites.
And what's the
And
winery,
then,
Jen?
Yeah, so again, this was just kind of a last minute pull for my cellar, but this is a Domaine Vauqueret and Fils. Okay. And this is a Premier Cru vineyard, and it is Malto de Tonnerre, as you can see right there. So one of the top Premier Cru vineyards in Chablis. Really lovely producer as well. And then for the Beaujolais, I went with Beaujolais Village, and this is Georges Duboeuf, as you can see. And I really find this Beaujolais interesting because it's a bit grippy and, you know, again, it always has that acidity, it always has that freshness, all that red fruit, but it's got a little bit of grip to it, and there is some carbonic maceration for those of you who know that wine term. So basically, it's just got this bit of just a hint of like this banana note, a little bit of bubble gum, just kind of makes it fun and just very, very drinkable, very easy drinking, but also great with food.
Yeah, and that carbonic maceration, for those who may not know, is whole bunch or whole berries of grapes are pressed, like so that they don't destem them. They throw the whole bunches in during fermentation. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. So it's kind of like this geeky inner, wine, thing where they're kind of in an inert vessel and there's an intercellular fermentation, and it just kind of pushes the fruit out, and it can give it a few extra characteristics such as this kind of bubble gum, cotton candy sometimes, banana popsicle, just kind of gives it all these notes and kind of softens it up and makes the wine a little more quaffable.
And people are attracted, like, I don't know if everyone would find bubblegum attractive as a wine aroma, but
it's not, it's an element. It is a tiny little hint of it, in the wine as you're tasting it, right? So it's kind of like you're smelling Beaujolais, you're like, oh, it smells like violets, and it smells like red cranberries and red cherries, and oh, there's a little hint of bubblegum. There's something kind of candied, right? Maybe it's red licorice to you, and there's this minerality to it, right? And There's something savory. So it's an element. It's not, oh, it smells like bubble gum.
Sure, sure. And maybe for each of you, maybe starting with Priya, what has been one of your most memorable vegan food and wine pairings? You maybe were at a dinner, or maybe it was just a casual picnic or somewhere, but what was the most memorable pairing you've ever had?
Ooh, that is a good question. I would say, like, in the course of the book, just there were so many great ones. I agree with Jen that I think the crab cakes and that we paired with Chablis, I believe it was just a gorgeous, gorgeous pairing. And it is one of those moments, like those aha moments that Jen mentioned earlier, where you feel like the wine tastes better and the food tastes better, and together it's just like this moment of glory. So that is definitely one. I think also I really enjoyed there's a sticky toffee pudding, and I can't remember what wine you paired with it, Jen, but you know, oftentimes people don't do dessert wines with desserts because you're already eating something so sugary, and so if you're going to do a pairing, you need to match it with something that's as sweet or sweeter. And I don't always like to have too much sugar, but I remember like that sticky toffee pudding. When I like to indulge, I really like to go hard. So sticky toffee pudding with the dessert wine, and I can't remember if it was a Sauternes, but it was just
I'd have to look it
gorgeous.
up.
We could look at it. I know we'll have to look it up, but maybe I'll look that up while Jen talks about hers, because I just remember thinking this is spectacular.
Okay,
Jen,
so we did sherry
Okay.
with that, Priya. So we
Okay.
did a Pedro Jimenez sherry.
Yes.
And then we did ice wine. So yes, it was sugar on sugar on sugar. But this is the principle of food and wine pairing when it comes to sweet desserts. The wine that you're pairing it with has to be as sweet as, if not sweeter. Otherwise, it's not going to be a
It'll
great
taste
match.
bitter.
So
Yeah.
you've got what sticky toffee pudding is very sweet. Delicious though.
Yes.
I think like memorable, there's obviously so many memories. There was a Mexican restaurant in Toronto, La Bartola. Am I
La
saying
Bartola.
that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, La Bartola.
Bartola.
Bartola. Okay. And now that we got that right, I went and did a dinner there with actually Carlo Estates. It was a charity event, actually. And so Sherry from Carlo had offered up the wines and for her to come, and I'd offered up myself as well to go and just to kind of talk about the wines. And we had a fabulous group. And of course, memorable experiences are also about who you're with. So they were just so much fun. But the food was unbelievable and very unexpected. And here's the thing, you don't always think about Mexican food and vegan hand in hand. But the chef there was deep, and he went into deep traditional, central Mexico food where they're taking hours and hours and hours to prepare one ingredient, if you will. And it was so complex and original and thoughtful. That was just such a great experience for me.
That is great. And just to clarify, because some people are under the impression that plants don't have protein, but they do have protein. How is it different from meat protein, first of all, and how does that impact your pairings that you make with wine?
Well,
that's a great
I'll
question.
start with just with the meat, and then you can talk about plant-based protein, Priya. So meat is very easy to pair with wine. Wine has acidity, right? It's an acidic beverage. And so that acidity naturally cuts through the fat that is in meat, right? So if you think about a ribeye steak and it's got lots of marbling, there's lots of fat in it. You take a Cabernet Sauvignon, which is got a lot of acidity and tannin. And so the acidity in the wine is working to cut the fat and the grease. And then the tannin is also helping, you kind of digest that piece of steak, if you will. It's very, very easy to have great pairings when you have butter, when you have animal fat, etc., right? The game changes a bit when you're moving to plant-based protein and fat. And over to you, Priya.
Yeah, and in terms of plants, yes, all plants have protein at varying degrees, but also in terms of plant-based foods, even when you're talking about things like brown rice, there's a lot of protein in brown rice. Oftentimes you'll find protein shakes that are made from pea protein because peas have a very high amount of protein. So there are so many sources of plant-based proteins that are not just plants in terms of fruits and vegetables, but in terms of other sources, legumes, beans, nuts, and seeds, all great sources of usually low saturated fat protein.
And how is the protein different from meat proteins? Like, is it shaped differently such that it, I don't know, gloms onto wine molecules differently? Or what do you know what goes on in terms of meat protein versus plant protein?
I don't know in terms of the molecular structure of it, but I know Jen talks about often about the fats in the proteins and how they work with the wine. So that's really what I know of it. Jen can go
Yeah.
further.
I don't know molecular structure either or how this all happens. That's a great question. We need to get a scientist involved at some point and dig deep into this because it is very interesting, actually. But from a sommelier perspective, when I think about plant-based fats, they are a lot cleaner, okay? There is less viscosity to them. When I think about animal fats, they are much more viscous, oily, and textured, right? So there's a difference in texture there when it comes to the actual fat. And then when you think about the protein itself, again, we're thinking about a different texture. When you think about a steak, it has a chewy texture. You have to really kind of, your jaw is, let's say, working in a way, right? So there's a different texture. When you're thinking about plant-based proteins, they're kind of in synergy with the rest of the molecular structure and everything that's going on, and they just come up and present differently and a little cleaner, if you will. So sometimes what Priya was working on was things like, finding that right texture, right? So that it is in a way replicating to a degree that viscous fat and that sort of cerebral biting down into protein or into texture that feels more meaty, if you will, if those were the dishes she was replicating. So that is an art and a skill in and of itself, for sure.
Sure, that makes sense. This is great. I can't believe how quickly the time has flown. So I'm going to ask each one of you for a tip, other than the ones that we've shared, and you've shared lots today. Maybe starting with you, Priya, one tip that our listeners can take away that will make them smarter about wine, or how to pair vegan wines and foods, or whatever you like. Just one tip in maybe less than a minute.
Well, we did sort of touch upon it, but I'm going to say that Riesling is a fantastic wine to try with a variety of spicy foods. So I would say get a group of friends together, get a bunch of different Rieslings from super dry to super sweet, and then get a different dishes that vary from low spice level to really spicy, and see how you can find a Riesling that will actually pair with every one of those and will work, because spicy foods, especially ethnic foods from India or from Asia, can be very difficult to pair with wines, which is why mostly people drink beer with them. But I would give Riesling a shot for that.
Nicely done. I didn't even have to use the buzzer there. Anyway. Jen, anything from any of the universe, it doesn't even have to be vegan wines and foods, but what is one wine tip you would share for those listening?
Well, I brought my wine tip, which is a Coravin. I'm not sure if your viewers have seen this before. If you are into wine, it is a bit of an expensive gadget, right? It is a couple $100s, but so many people are afraid to pull the cork on a nice bottle of wine because I'm not going to drink it within a day. I just want a glass. And so this tool is just great because It essentially is, putting inert gas back into the bottle, and it's allowing you to keep that bottle for, perhaps a month, 2 months, just depending. The more you take out of the bottle, the less time you have, of course, with that wine. But it will extend the shelf life of that wine for you for some weeks, which is just fantastic because, maybe you're the only person who enjoys wine in your house, and or maybe your partner is doing dry January. I don't know, but we find that people are being more thoughtful about their consumption as well. And so
Sure.
I think just having these tips and tricks and tools so that you can preserve the life of that wine are helpful. If you don't want to spend the money, certainly put the cork back in and throw it in the fridge. That'll help at least give you a couple more days out of that wine.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we wrap up, is there anything that we haven't gone over, anything that we missed that you wanted to add?
I mean, there's so much that we could add. We could get into so much more detail in terms of the food side and making easy swaps. But I would say that that's one of the things that Jen and I really focused on in terms of the book, is that there are the recipes, but there's also, she has included a lot of wine knowledge, including her 5 favorite vegan wine varietals and styles to pair with plant-based foods. And I've included some tips on how to be a very eco-minded hostess. So how to avoid being wasteful and consuming too much plastic, and so using sort of the beauty of nature and things that might be in your pantry or in your garden to entertain. So I would say that take a look at the book, and you'll find a lot of great tips in there that are aside from just recipes and pairings.
Awesome. Jen?
Oh, I'm gonna agree with her. I'm just gonna plug the book. Yeah,
There's the book.
Plug.
Those who are listening, we'll put it in the show notes.
We want you to read it. So today was a taste of what's in there, but there's a lot more information, and it really just spells out how to, how to make a beautiful meal, even if you are not vegan or vegetarian. And this is the thing I'll add, is that one of the surprises for me is that the people who were showing up to our events, and we've done several, a lot of times weren't themselves vegan, but you know what? It was their, it was their daughter-in-law who was, who comes for Easter dinner and comes for Christmas dinner and comes for Sunday dinner, and they wanted to make her feel welcome and to have a great experience, and they wanted to know how to do that. And so I love this book for, because it can also give you the tools. Sometimes it's just a guest you're entertaining, and you want to, you want to make them feel totally welcomed, and like you've put some thought into it.
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing, which is that our partner for the book, we have a charitable partner, which is the Toronto Vegetarian Food Bank. So a portion of proceeds from every book goes to support their work, because they provide plant-based foods for people in need. And that's something I think we don't often think about, is that when people have to use food banks to supplement their food, sometimes they have to make a choice between just feeding their families or sticking with their own personal dietary beliefs. So we're really proud of the work that Matt Noble and his team do at the Toronto Vegetarian Food Bank, and happy to support them with the book.
Absolutely. That's great. We'll put a link to their charity in the show notes as well. So where can we buy and find the book, The Social Herbivore?
Yeah, you can find it wherever you're watching from the world. You can find it through Amazon, so you can order a copy through Amazon. You can also visit the site at thesocialherbivore.co, and we have a tab there for the book, so you can order it there. And if you order it directly from us, then we can have it signed for you if that's what you like, so we can personalize it for you. But it's definitely widely available on Amazon.
Great. And where can we find the two of you online?
Well, you can find me at Social Herbivore, and also on Instagram at Social Herbivore. And Jen?
Yeah, on Instagram at Jen Huether MS.
Okay, great. Excellent. Well, thank you both. This has been so informative. Just love this. And you're right, we could talk a lot further. But there's the book. People can get the book to really dive into this topic more than we have. So I will say goodbye for now, but I'm really looking forward to the next time we can chat, ladies, and maybe it'll be in person even.
Yeah, that would
be great. And thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
Oh, great. Awesome. No, that's great. Don't hang up yet or log off. But and just a reminder that you can win a copy of the book, The Social Herbivore. Just email me, Natalie@nataliemclean.com. There it is. And we'll link to it in the show notes too. Well done. Thank you both. All right.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
All right. Don't hang up. Just we want to make sure it up.